there, this is Adele from Naked.Recovery online. I wanted to make a video today off the back of a coaching call that I just had with a client. Now the story is, in this instance, it's a woman and she is having an affair and she's basically feeling in limbo because she wants to be back with her husband and she's just not sure what to do, and she feels like she is in this conflict in choosing between the affair partner and the husband. So in that particular situation, what is the kind of coaching and the experience and the journey that we go through in that kind of coaching to get her to a place where she makes a choice? So there's a few kind of factors in understanding what to do when you're going through that kind of trauma in your life. First things first is, what prompts somebody to have an affair? So initially, in kind of exploring this and researching affairs and kind of affair science, like what I've noticed is that people have affairs because they're really trying to reclaim a piece of themselves outside of their marriage. There's some kind of person that they really want to be, and they don't feel they have the permission or the ability or the level of honesty to be that person within their marriage. So what they do at that point is they fracture a piece of themselves and they go outside of their relationship to reclaim this piece. Now, it might be a creative version of themselves, a daring version, a more naughty version, and in their life as it's set up with kids and structures and rules and that kind of stuff is not set up in a way where they can be that person inside their marriage. So they go and fracture themselves and be that person outside of their marriage. So that's why when when people have affairs, they feel so alive and so like in this heightened state, because there's a reclaiming process happening of, I'm now me again, I feel like me, or, all those kind of words and things that I hear when people are kind of going through that journey. So that's the first reason why people have affairs. But it's kind of, in the one way, it's a guilty pleasure. So there's that, it's mixed, it's so tainted in some ways because it's mixed with guilt and kind of an inconsistency and an incongruency with their values. So by fracturing themselves and leaving the relationship to reclaim themselves outside of their relationship, you are behaving in conflict with your values. You have a values conflict. So part of you is really alive and enjoying that experience, but a part of you will feel numb to it or not quite fully engaged with that process. So sometimes people are not, they struggle to spend the night, or they struggle to really orgasm with their partner or whatever, because they can't allow themselves to be fully present with their affair partner. Then they return to their marriage and they struggle to be fully present with their, spouse, because they're feeling guilty or they're having some kind of values conflict with what they've done with the affair partner. So that values conflict and that guilty pleasure taints the experience of that reclaiming of self. And that leads to an immense amount of stress and strain, and there's a burden in having an affair. So affairs and an addiction. So we often become quite addicted to the affair partner because it's something you can't get enough of, but you know you shouldn't be doing it, but you love it and you want to be with it. But it's also, it's kind of stays stuck in this kind of idealized state, because an affair partner is something sexy and forbidden and, it's perfect. It's in a bubble. You're not doing the dishes with this person. You're not, hanging out with them and picking tiles. You don't have to change nappies with that person. This is not somebody that you're leading daily life with, or who's necessarily you've seen the worst part of them and they've seen the worst part of you. It gets stuck in that limerence, romance kind of perfect place. So in your mind and processing, you're making this relationship so ideal that it's almost impossible to compare it to anything else. And that becomes very addictive. It feels so good when you're with that person, when you're thinking of that person. It becomes something to kind of obsess and ruminate over. So a lot of people who are struggling to kind of leave an affair and kind of reconcile their values conflict, they're in that place of limbo because they're straddling two universes. On the one hand, they're in this relationship with this idealized kind of fantasy person, And then they kind of come home to their husband or their wife and they're like, oh, sometimes they'll argue a lot. They'll be the worst version of themselves with their spouse because they need to justify why they've done what they've done. Or they feel so guilty, they treat their spouse like so amazingly, and it's kind of these buying gifts and they, taking them on lots of dates and sometimes, connecting with them at a deeper level. Whatever it is what the limbo is, the thing to really get is it's very unlikely that you can sustain this for a very long time. The lifespan of most affairs is a maximum of 3 years. And statistics are not on the side of the affair partner ever becoming a real partner in life. Sad to say that in about 90% of those relationships, it doesn't end well. And it doesn't end out well because it began on a foundation of deception. And it began, in a world where there was so much heightened perfection. It's very difficult to live up to that level of expectation and the kind of bar and pedestal that you have it on. So in most cases, the pain after a few years will just get to people. That feeling of being invisible, not being claimed in reality, having to keep up the secrecy and the deception is just too much for a lot of people. And they eventually get to a place where they know they need to choose. And we have a program that helps people kind of go through that journey and process to powerfully choose which life they want to lead. And it's funny, like most instances, people choose to go back to their spouse. But for a lot of them, they hedge. So they kind of they go back with their spouse, but they kind of still keep the affair partner in the wings because just in case whatever it is that we're trying to do with the spouse, it doesn't work out, then we've got this other person waiting in the wings. It doesn't work either. To really have the relationship with your spouse work out and to kind of rebuild and reset this and put the spark back in your marriage, you need to put 2 feet into that life with your spouse. You have to leave the affair partner completely behind. And this is because when you reclaim yourself outside of your relationship, you fracture yourself into pieces. That's what you're struggling to live with, are these different versions of yourself. And to maintain that is exhausting. And that's why you're unhappy and feeling depressed, and it's because of that split in personality. So to really have the marriage work again, or to have a chance to kind of reboot and reset that, you have to leave all those other lives behind, and you have to put 2 feet into one of those lives. And that is what happiness is all about, is integration. It's about bringing your whole self to your life and not fractured bits and pieces of you. And that's really the journey that people go through when they want to save a marriage off the back of an affair. And, having an affair is not a deal breaker for most marriages. Most marriages that have had an affair during that journey, sometimes it can really strengthen that relationship. And the reason why is because in coming back and putting 2 feet back in your marriage, to make that marriage work, what you really need to do is be honest at a level that you've never been honest before about your needs and precisely what it was that you were trying to reclaim outside of your relationship. And to trust that your spouse has the capability and the capacity to meet those needs inside your relationship. That is the secret. So the journey that I'm kind of going on with this particular client, and with most of the clients that go through this program, first things first is there's this period of kind of research and development where they learn everything about, affairs and addiction and how, why it is that they were trying to reclaim a piece of themselves outside of their relationship. But secondly, they get to that point of choice. There's a T-junction. Because whatever you're going to do, you cannot maintain these separate lives and these disintegrated pieces of yourself. You need to commit to one life or the other. After that choice is made, it's then a period of analysis and discovery of precisely what the needs are. Now, for women, the needs are quite complex, and there's actually several creatures or versions of person within every woman, and each creature or version actually needs an analysis of what those specific needs and feelings and kind of requirements are to be met for that person to actually be fulfilled. For men, it's slightly more simple, slightly less complex, but there's also this concept of creatures and moods and different people within us that need to be fulfilled. And by identifying these different versions of ourselves, what we begin to do is, rather than trying to reclaim these pieces and versions of ourselves outside of a relationship, we have the chance to actually do it within the relationship. And then there's a journey of education between the partners. So that's kind of the sort of, the journey and the process. If you can relate to any of that and you're stuck in a limbo, or you're contemplating having an affair, or you're thinking about reclaiming yourself outside of your marriage, talk to somebody about it. Our door is always open, but before going down that path, you really want to evaluate whether it's worth it. What I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt is, if you're trying to reclaim a piece of yourself outside of your relationship and you're already down that journey, cleaning it up, it's a big mess. It makes a big mess, and it will create a trauma and a fractious personality within yourself. Happiness is a function of integration. The sooner you kind of get help to kind of work on how you can integrate, the better in kind of resolving that journey, if you're feeling that sort of midlife crisis within. All right, so I hope some of those insights and things make sense. If you get stuck, chat to us. Till then.